All right, today we are diving deep into one of the most famous, maybe the most famous chemical in your body. We're going to meet your master modulator, serotonin.
Ever stop to wonder how one single chemical could be pulling the strings on your mood, your memory, even how well you sleep at night? It sounds like science fiction, right? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today.
So, let's officially meet serotonin. You might see it called 5-HT in scientific papers. Now, the technical term is a monoamine neurotransmitter, but don't let that scare you. All that really means is it's a messenger, a chemical messenger that lets your brain cells talk to each other. And believe me, that conversation is crucial for, well, pretty much everything you do. Okay, get ready for a surprise. If I asked you where most of your serotonin is, you'd probably say the brain, right? I mean, it makes sense. But you'd be off by a lot. A whopping 95% of your body's serotonin isn't in your head at all. It's in your gut. Yeah, your gastrointestinal tract is where most of it is made and stored, helping run things like digestion.
But here's the catch, and it is a huge one. All that serotonin in your gut, it can't get into your brain. There's this super exclusive bouncer at the door called the blood-brain barrier, and it's not on the guest list. So what does the brain do? It has to make its own supply completely from scratch. And that small, independent 5% supply is the real VIP we're interested in today.
Okay, so how does this all work? How does this little molecule actually send its messages? Well, it all comes down to a tiny, lightning-fast conversation happening in the microscopic gaps between your brain cells.
Now, I know this diagram looks a little busy, but the idea is actually really simple. Think of it like this. You've got a neuron that's sending a message and another one that's receiving it. The space between them? That's the synapse. And serotonin is the message itself, released into that gap to carry the signal across. This is the stage for the whole show. This whole thing happens in 4 basic steps. First, synthesis. Your brain builds serotonin from something called tryptophan, which you get from food. Step 2, release. When it's time to send a message, the neuron shoots serotonin out into the synapse. 3, binding. It floats across and latches onto receptors on the next neuron. Boom, message delivered. And finally, step 4, and this is super important, reuptake. The leftovers get cleaned up.
So that cleanup process is called reuptake. And there's a specific protein that does the job. It's called SERT. The best way to think of SERT is like a tiny little vacuum cleaner. It just swoops in and sucks all the extra serotonin back up into the first cell so it can be used again. This is how the brain ends the conversation. Now, remember that name, SERT, that little vacuum. It's going to be a major player later in our story.
All right, so we know how it works, but what is it actually doing? Let's pull back the curtain and look at the incredible and kind of mind-boggling list of jobs that serotonin handles.
Just look at this map of the brain. This shows you everything. The serotonin-producing neurons, they start way down in a tiny part of the brainstem called the raphe nuclei. But from there, wow, they branch out like this massive superhighway, reaching into practically every nook and cranny of your brain. We're talking the parts that do the high-level thinking and the deep-down parts that handle emotion. And because it has access to everything, it gets to have a say in almost everything. It helps modulate, and that's the key word. It's not an on-off switch. It fine-tunes your mood, your memory, how you learn, your anxiety levels, even how you sleep, what you eat, and how you feel pain. It's not the boss of any one thing. It's more like the master conductor of the whole orchestra, just making sure everything stays in harmony.
And this is where we get to the conflict in our story. Because, as powerful and elegant as this system is, it's also incredibly delicate. And when those signals get scrambled, the fallout can be massive. So what does happen when the system gets disrupted? What if there's not enough serotonin? Or the receptors are faulty? Or what if that little vacuum cleaner, SERT, is working overtime? Well, this is where we start to see the links to some of the biggest challenges in mental health today.
And this image really drives home just how wide-ranging the impact is. A problem with the serotonin system isn't just about one disorder. No, it's a central piece of the puzzle in a whole host of different neuropsychiatric conditions.
Let's just look at 2 of the biggest ones, depression and anxiety. For decades, the leading idea for depression, the serotonin hypothesis, was that it's linked to hypofunction, which is just a sciencey way of saying not enough serotonin activity. With anxiety, the connection's also really strong, but the focus is often on the receptors, the docking stations for the message, not working quite right.
But the list just keeps going. Scientists have found links between serotonin issues and obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, ADHD, even things like migraines, schizophrenia, autism spectrum disorders, and addiction.
It's just staggering how fundamental this one chemical system is to our overall well-being.
So if the problem is a scrambled signal, then the solution seems pretty straightforward, right? You try to fix the signal. And that brings us to the final chapter here, the intervention. This is where we try to hack the brain's code.
Let's boil the problem down. In a condition like depression, one of the main issues might be that there just isn't enough serotonin hanging out in that synapse. The message isn't getting through loud and clear. It's too quiet, or it fades out too quickly.
So, if the serotonin is being vacuumed up way too fast, what's the logical solution? You jam the vacuum cleaner, right? You find a way to block that SERT protein we keep talking about. That way, more serotonin stays in the conversation for longer, which makes the signal stronger.
And that's precisely what one of the most famous classes of drugs in the world does. They're called SSRIs. That stands for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitors. Their one and only job is to go in and block that CRT transporter, that vacuum, to turn up the volume on the serotonin signal.
You probably know some of their names, like fluoxetine or sertraline, and they have been absolutely life-changing for millions. But, and this is so important to remember, they're not a perfect fix. They're not a magic bullet. Our source material points out that about a third of patients don't really respond to them. And that just goes to show you how much more we have to learn about the incredible complexity of the brain. And one more crucial warning. This is all about balance. You can't just crank the dial to 11. Pushing the system too hard, which can happen if you mix certain medications, can cause a really dangerous condition called serotonin syndrome. It's a powerful reminder that with brain chemistry, more is definitely not always better. You know, to wrap this all up, a quote from one of the papers we've been looking at just says it all. Serotonin exerts powerful influences, and when that system gets disturbed, it plays a central role in so many of these disorders. It really is the master modulator. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. We've managed to figure out how this tiny chemical messenger works, and we've even built tools to hack its code. So as we get better and better at this, what does that mean? What does it mean for the future of mental health, and maybe even for our own ideas about what makes you, you? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.